Last week, the stock market took a big tumble, led down by Nvidia and the so-called Magnificent Seven stocks. What caused the drop? An announcement from a Chinese startup company that it had developed top-quality artificial intelligence on an ultra-low budget and without the super-secret top-of-the-line semiconductor chips that we have restricted the Chinese from accessing. DeepSeek's announcement rattled the tech world and crushed the big tech stocks. Nvidia, the maker of the most sophisticated semiconductor chips in the world, suffered the worst one-day market cap loss of any company in history, losing almost $600 billion in a matter of hours. All this from a $6 million investment by a Chinese startup? Reason.com called this AI's Sputnik moment. Now, Americans may not remember the Sputnik story, but essentially it was when the Soviet Union leapfrogged American scientists and launched the first Earth-orbiting satellite in 1957. This was a wake-up call. It began the space race, and it launched us to land on the moon in the next decade. Hearing the DeepSeek news also reminded me of another space story. I want to emphasize, this story is not true, but the point it makes is valid. The internet rumor went viral like this. When NASA discovered that ballpoint pens would not work in zero gravity, they commissioned a space pen at the cost of over $100 million. A typical American response. The Russians? They just used a pencil. By the way, I use a space pen from the Fisher Space Pen Company. It does write upside down. It writes in zero gravity, but it was developed by an entrepreneur at zero cost to taxpayers. These pens cost the space program maybe a couple of dollars a piece, but the point's valid. Do we sometimes overspend while other nations use something more practical, like a pencil? And that's the DeepSeek story. China matches our best AI for just $6 million and without the most sophisticated equipment. That shocked the market. Maybe companies don't have to buy the top of the line to get results. I thought of another analogy. Are Americans buying Lamborghinis to drive Uber, and then China comes along with an ordinary car that works just as well for ride sharing? There's a lot to take in from all of this, and we'll need to turn to an expert. There are implications for our national security and for our national priorities. There are implications for investors. There's implications for energy and our electric grid. I'll set the stage on these discussions, and then we'll bring on Professor Phil Parker from INSEAD, one of the world's top AI experts for analysis. Before we bring in Phil, let's tackle a few of the big issues. In terms of national security, this is a wake-up call. We've treated AI and business in general as just that, business. But as we say all the time here, what we see as a marketplace, our enemies view as a battle space. This might be a Sputnik moment that we have long seen our tech superiority leapfrogged, even though it has been our #1 strategic advantage. If the Chinese stole the high-end chips to make this happen, we have a problem. If they didn't steal chips and still got the results reported, do we have a bigger problem? Is the AI genie out of the bottle? Can our national security respond? These are legitimate questions that must be asked in the current unrestricted war that we're in with China. What seems to be true is that the DeepSeek has offered evidence to the world of very sophisticated AI outside America's sphere of influence. Keep in mind that we're only shown what the CCP wants us to know. So think of this as chat CCP. Or is DeepSeek a deep fake, intended to throw us off in some way at the start of the Trump administration? Could they be pretending they don't need the top chips, so we reallocate capital away from their development? Did you notice that DeepSeek was quickly hacked after their announcement? This tells me the major Western intelligence agencies might want the answer and they don't know how to get it. Regardless of the motivation, DeepSeek has made an impact on our stock market, economy, and our AI strategic planning. Was the announcement a Chinese fake-out designed to hurt us? The stock market briefly tumbled and later recovered, but this teaches us a few things. One, the S&P 500 is so heavily weighted with massive tech stocks like Nvidia that a crack in the AI narrative can cause the index to tumble even if most stocks do well. This could be a warning shot to index investors if that party may be over. Smaller companies and value stocks may do better. Of course, we don't give investment advice. That's just an observation of one possibility. Check with your investment professional before changing your strategy. But #2, if it's true we can deploy AI with much lower energy cost and entry costs, the economy should boom. Interestingly, on the announcement, energy stocks dropped sharply. The theory was that we would need less energy without the fancy high-end AI. The reality is, however, due to something called the Jevons paradox, Because AI is cheaper, people will want more of it, and even if the effort requires less energy at the unit level, the greater usage overall will increase energy demand overall. Point number 3, the Chinese have learned that they can influence, if not manipulate, our stock market with announcements. We don't know if they're telling us what they're telling us is real or not, but we do know that they now are aware they can manipulate our market sentiment. The whole notion that a very young entrepreneur with less than $6 million of investment could outperform our best AI costing billions, that should be legitimately questioned. Chinese government stimulus package has dedicated $137 billion to AI. What if the best can be had for $6 million? And why would America's top companies like X, Google, and Meta commit $250 billion? There's a lot of questions here. Another question, is this a Trojan horse like TikTok is that gets Americans hooked on AI products that they can add to their phones and that will send constant streams of data back to China? Do the terms of service allow DeepSeek to examine your phone and share your data? Is this digital crack that gets you so addicted that users demand our government keep it legal? To get answers to those questions, we're going to have to better understand AI. And to do that, we're going to need to turn to Professor Phil Parker, a long-term friend. And for full disclosure, Phil has asked me to join the board of one of his private companies. I'm going to introduce him right before the break so that when we come back, we'll be able to dive right into the topic. Phil Parker is a professor, the INSEAD Chair Professor of Management Science, and he heads their Toto Geo AI Lab, which pioneered natural language generation, or NLG algorithms. He was awarded the first or pioneering patent in this field going back to the year 2000, and he's used this technology in over 100 countries. He has presented to the G8, the White House, Davos, taught at MIT, Harvard, and Stanford. Phil will be announcing later this year some breakthroughs in his lab that he's been working on that, like DeepSeek, they're going to make waves with some big commercial applications. And after the break, we're going to get right into this with Phil. But this is perhaps the single most important element of our economic future. President Trump's aware. He's created this new Stargate program where we're going to invest heavily in AI. Is this investment properly placed, or is this natural evolution? We're going to have to dive into this subject with Phil Parker, and also the recent developments in the AI space. Is DeepSeek a deep fake? We need to understand what's going on in the race between China and the US. It is our future that's at stake, so stay tuned, and we'll be right back with Professor Phil Parker from INSEAD University. In uncertain times, finding stability in the economy can feel challenging. But what if you could navigate economic volatility while honoring your biblical values? At Timothy Plan, they believe this balance is possible. Timothy Plan filters its volatility-weighted ETFs and family of mutual funds through a biblical pro-life and pro-family lens, so you can see competitive returns and moral responsibility, helping you to weather the economic storms. With Timothy Plan, align your investments with your values while adapting to our ever-changing culture. Since 1994, Timothy Plan has been recognized leader in biblically responsible investing. Timothy Plan, your bridge between faith, finances, and the future. Visit timothyplan.com or call 1-800-TIM-PLAN or 1-800-846-7526. Investing includes risk, including possible loss of principal. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objectives, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Here's a $10 bill. It's got the picture of Alexander Hamilton on the front of it. You know, it's kind of sad. When I was 10 years old, everything that I could buy for $1 now costs about $10. That's the cost of inflation. It's just paper. It's not backed by anything. You can't exchange it for gold and silver. You used to, but you can't do that anymore. And that's unfortunate. You know, pirates wouldn't accept this. Pirates, they wanted gold and silver. Patriots, the founders of this nation, also wanted gold and silver coin. In fact, they put a provision in the Constitution, 17 words, that said states could only make gold and silver coins tender within the states. That's why I wrote this new book, Pirate Money, Discovering the Founders' Hidden Plan for Economic Justice and Defeating the Great Reset. It will explain exactly the history of money and exactly why gold and silver coins can be made modern with new technology and a useful monetary system. PirateMoneyBook.com. Welcome, Professor Parker, to the Economic War Room. I know you've been here. In fact, you taught an AI class right here at Liberty Hawk Ranch. It's good to have you back.
That's right. Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, I want to dive right in because AI is all over the headlines with the DeepSeek announcement, the stock market got roiled and everything else. Can you give our viewers kind of a quick overview, a summary of where this all started and where it's headed?
Yeah, it's a very big question because AI is a very old field. A lot of people trace it back 2,000 years with Archimedes' screw. Anything mechanical, non-human that replicates human intelligence is artificial, therefore, and intelligent because it mimics that. So simply a pump, a mechanical pump was big. But most people started around the Industrial Revolution, around 1770, with the power loom in Britain and weavers, having a machine mimic expert weavers. Very narrow AI, but enough to disrupt the industry. And what happened when power looms were invented? Of course, the cost of textiles went down. The industry boomed. Employment boomed. It just made a growth economy like no one had seen before. Eli Whitney's cotton gin had the same effect in the cotton industry. When Henry Ford started applying Frederick Taylor's Taylorism to the automobile manufacturing, all of a sudden automation, simple little AI that would automatically move cars in the right order at the right place at the right time, mimicking humans pushing the chassis instead. Boom, the cost of production plummets, the demand for conveyor belts exploded, employment went up, prices plummeted, basically allowing the automobile to be a commonplace item in essence. And then later in the 40s, we had the computer revolution, right, with ENIAC after the Turing machine during World War II. University of Pennsylvania had a huge machine that could add, subtract, multiply, and divide. And in our generation, in 1967, Caltech came up with the pocket calculator. It could do square roots. You would type in a prompt, 16, hit a button, a response would come back, 4, right? Well, we're the only species that does square roots, right? So what you're looking at is the dawn of interactive AI at a consumer level, the pocket calculator. And as you remember, if you're old enough, or anyone listening is old enough, it was banned in schools. People feared the pocket calculator. Like, what is this thing going to do? Kids aren't going to learn math. It's a disaster, etc. Huge speculation going on, right? Eventually, the software commoditized. And really, the only people who made money were people who are good at adding certain features to that software to make it interesting. But even then, there was diminishing returns. We had the basic functions, then we started adding more functions, but people tended to use those extra functions less and less and less. The earliest applications, add, subtract, multiply, and divide, carried that technology for a while. Now, that is, to people in the field of AI, that is AI. It's artificial intelligence. But nobody calls a calculator and looks at it and goes, wow, amazing AI. They don't do that. This is called the AI effect. Basically, there's the marketing behind AI. What people today call AI, 20 years from now, they're going to look back and go, oh, it's just dumb software. And that has been happening for half a century. There's always this big AI thing. You'll remember the famous 2010 Watson. Watson was an algorithm which was good at trivia questions mostly, and it was demonstrated in Jeopardy, right? It was a branding strategy by IBM to say, hey, we have AI, use us for your high-powered computation. Look, we have a computer as smart as a Jeopardy champion. And then came Deep Blue, as you remember. Those algorithms were called rule-based algorithms, following rules, basically. Simulating what a good chess match would be, quite performing. Then came deep learning because of crypto and cheap graphics card and Nvidia innovating on the software side with something called CUDA. All of a sudden, people could access graphics cards for a variety of things that they couldn't before, including statistical analyses. And there used to be software packages called SAS and SPSS, which were expensive. Academics launched R. Google engineers launched Python. Software was free. The price of graphics cards were cheap. Boom, we had deep learning. Everybody started doing neural networks and things like that. Large language models are new to the business, right? And after about 7 years of engineering, we had ChatGPT, et cetera, come out. This is called natural language generation. LLMs are one methodology within natural language generation. There are many methodologies, and these methodologies are now being blended together. The way the economics works is this, and this is the historical part, Kevin, this is the most important. Of course, when you build software, there's a massive spike. You spend a huge amount of money. When you do the next version of that software, the spike is lower. the incremental cost between the spikes is always low. It's the cost of inference, the cost of communicating with the software is very low. But building the software, super expensive. Then it goes down. The next spike, lower the next spike. So DeepSeek was an eventuality. It's always going down, the incremental cost of the next generation of things. So whether the Chinese had invested in this or not, somebody else was. And we'll talk about that maybe in the second segment. But there's an eventuality to the economics of these platforms, and it's replicating as if it had in history as well. And we should probably expect roughly the same pattern. It's just that this is now popularized NLG, which was really pioneered roughly in around the year 2000 or so, when NLG became a very big thing. And most recent iterations of it are going through massive investments. That's true. And it's just going to continue that pattern. So the really question that people have is, what's the competition internationally? Who's going to win, et cetera? So there's the history of it. And then there's specific questions within that are kind of interesting.
Yeah, well, thank you. That's a great overview and great history. I think what roiled the stock market was the notion that China doesn't have to have these extraordinarily sophisticated chips that Nvidia produces that we've been embargoing. We've been preventing them from getting those. And so the stock market just reacted. Nvidia was seen as the be-all, end-all, and always supplier of these chips. And that we woke up and that wasn't necessarily true, was it?
Yeah, no, not necessarily true. But again, remember Intel, right? Everything was Intel for a while, right? This will also happen to NVIDIA eventually one day. There will be competition. Things will happen. Whenever there's surplus or profit in a market, people are attracted to it, and there will be competition from one place or another. So over the long run, this is going to happen. What happened was there was a claim of a very low cost structure. Now, we don't know if that's the average, fully loaded, incremental, marginal cost. When the cost of anything, there might be an incremental cost that's very low because we've already built a massive farm and we're only telling you about the cost we had to incur incrementally. Nobody knows at this point. My speculation is that we all ride on the shoulders of giants, right? So the incremental cost anyway will be lower for whoever's next, right? You know, the Berkeley folks said they were able to do something for about $450, right? Et cetera, in that domain. This is going to be the natural progression, whether the spike is $6 million, $80 million, $100 million, it will be a spike. It'll be lower next time, naturally anyway.
All right, we're going to need to take a break. And when we come back, I want to dive much deeper into all of this. I mean, because there are national security implications, but what I hear you saying, this is the natural evolution of technology rather than some big disturbance. And I think that's an important and interesting viewpoint that we've got to capture. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll dive deeper into DeepSeek and whether or not it's a deep fake. We'll be right back.
Washington said paper money opens the door to every species of fraud and injustice. Jefferson said paper is poverty. Hamilton said to emit an unfunded paper as the sign of value ought not to continue a formal part of the Constitution. The founders hated paper money, so they put a pirate money clause in the Constitution for our state to use. Learn more at transactionalgold.com.
I'm Kevin Sorbo. When you spend money, you consider who you're buying from and the causes they support. If you don't, then you're likely supporting companies that are trying to destroy our country and take away our freedoms. Patriot Mobile is America's only Christian conservative wireless provider. They're a cell phone company and a good one. They offer nationwide coverage on the best 4G and 5G networks along with 100% US-based customer support. But here's the deal. Patriot Mobile's mission has nothing to do with cell phones. They carry out their mission by giving back millions of dollars every year to Christian conservative causes that are actively engaged in the fight to save America. Voting is no longer enough to beat the woke. We have to band together, support like-minded companies, and vote with our dollars. That's how we win. Stop supporting companies that want to destroy America and join Patriot Mobile today by visiting patriotmobile.com or call 972-PATRIOT.
We're speaking with Professor Phil Parker of INSEAD University. He's a dear friend. He's an AI expert. He's been in this for a long time. And we were talking about DeepSeek. I can just tell you, there was a panic that happened inside the Pentagon, a panic in the intelligence agencies, a panic in Wall Street among the investment crowd. Oh my goodness, the Chinese have announced that they, for $6 million or less, have accomplished what took others billions of dollars. Now, in the last segment, Phil Parker just explained to us why that's the natural evolution of technology. Maybe there's not a reason for panic, but the question remains: is this a Sputnik moment for the world? Phil, what do you think?
No, it is not. The Sputnik moment really happened when we had back propagation invented at Stanford and MIT in 1982. That was the Sputnik moment, right? Where we invented the use of neural networks to actually estimate models, right? I mean, that was really the moment. And that came from Harvard, MIT, and Stanford, right? So born and bred American technology that was then took a while to take off because of the cost of computing. We drove down the cost of computing in America. So we created that Sputnik moment. Now, what you're looking at is clever reusing and repurposing of all that knowledge that's been created from America. But this is to be expected. As you know, when Meta decided to release their large language model for free, Llama, right? When someone's charging money and someone launches something for free, clearly there's something going on there. And basically, Meta decided to commoditize their compliments. They see these models as being a complement to posting on Instagram and Facebook, right? So we should drive down the cost of a tennis ball if we're making tennis rackets, right? So they're commoditizing the LLM market, right? So that's what started it. That was the Sputnik moment. Because then when the French launched Mixtral, they had to price it at zero. When the UAE had their large language model, right, out of Abu Dhabi, they had to put it at zero. Everyone is now being forced to go down to the bottom of the pricing point of releasing these models and putting them in the open source. And as time has gone on, there's diminishing returns to investment. When you ask someone, who is George Washington? Well, there's only so many ways to answer it, right? So there's diminishing returns, and the frontier models are being trailed by the open source models, right? And that gap has been slowly diminishing. The delta is getting smaller and smaller. What happened with, the newer, DeepSeek and others, is that they're kind of near the top of that curve, and so they've just caught up, right? And so it's a natural thing that would have happened anyway. This is just going to happen. It's just narrowed and made it faster to happen. So what LLM companies are doing are quickly trying to sign up enterprise accounts to lock in customer loyalty and things like that, like we'll be your supplier of models. It's right now we're at the first nanosecond of this kind of technology. There's an announcement, Singapore, Indonesia, jointly creating their own LLMs together. I mean, all countries out there are going to be commoditizing the models themselves, right? So then the question is, strategically, what makes the models cheap? It's not going to be the training of them as such, but the inference use of them by the public, because that uses electricity, it uses energy, it uses cards. And this is where Nvidia stands to gain a lot, because as people tend to use them more in their normal lives, that still requires a lot of compute, just does. And especially if you want fast speed, low latency, that's true. But then there's also groups of people, they have labs out there that are saying, hey, is there a way to disintermediate even that and maybe not use GPUs, but use CPUs, which are far cheaper even than that, etc. So there's a race on methodology, reducing costs, and it's totally natural, just like it happened in the pocket calculator business or any other. This is just going to race to very quickly. Well, to keep up, you have to be, on it.
One thing I remember Seymour Cray in the Cray computer system, and he was building these massive supercomputers, and others came along and found out how you could parallel computers and you could achieve similar effects, lowering the cost dramatically. And so I see a parallel. Is that the same kind of thing?
Yeah, it is. It is, in fact. It's very, very similar. We, as humans, we were given this gift of innovation, right? And we're just going to constantly try to figure out to do improvement. The competition, per se, is international. Every country wants sovereignty. They want to have their own thing. They want to race to it. Many are too small to do it. But the ability to get into it now has now dropped. But it was going to drop anyway, and it's really because of the competition that took place in America. That's really what. And Chinese and others are now getting into the game and realizing, oh my gosh, we can't make money on these things unless we have really good applications or really good business use cases. And that's where the game is now, is what are the use cases people can find that are profitable? That will drive the card industry. And Nvidia will thrive as long as they can beat other card manufacturers who are trying to do the same thing, right? So it'll be hardware to hardware competition mostly. They've been very smart in having software that's really powerful that works with their cards. So they've been able to keep at the top, and that will continue. But as more and more competition enters in the hardware space, that's where I would find it more interesting. In the LLM space, that's going to keep going down over time. People are going to innovate applications. Who's going to win? People with cheap electricity. And I think the policies that's going on around the world right now, I mean, Germany is committing suicide of sorts, economically, of course, in this area. I mean, they're driving their own energy costs up, so they can't play the game. They missed the internet revolution, all of Germany. France, ditto, right? And many countries out there just are looking around what happened, and ultimately you have low energy that reduces the marginal cost of anything going through processors. Who has natural energy reserves? Those countries will do quite well in this AI space. If they have good manufacturing incentives, they will do well in this AI space. So manufacturing and energy, those are the keys. Software, people like me that come up with algorithms, we're commoditized. This is no big deal. It's really public policy that's attracting capital that gives us high returns. Energy, deregulation of hardware, making it easy to set up facilities, infrastructure, that's the key. And I think those are the policy that's the real competition going on, less so the software side.
Well, interesting you say that. Based on what you just shared, I think the Trump policies of all drill, baby, drill, get energy costs down, those are the right policies for a global economic war.
Oh, that's scaring people. There it is. You hit it. That's it.
All right. Well, this is phenomenal. I appreciate you giving us your insights. A lot of people are scared by this DeepSeek announcement. What you're telling us is this is a natural evolution. Now, maybe you not want to put DeepSeek on your phone because it could be a listening device, it just like TikTok or whatever else, sending data back to China. All right, Phil Parker, you are a wonderful man. I appreciate your friendship.
Pleasure.
I appreciate your insight, and thank you so much. All right, what we see here is insight into AI, and we're going to summarize all of this in our free economic battle plan. Remember, what we see as a marketplace, our enemies view as a battle space. This is Kevin Freeman from the Economic War Room.